All right, we're about to step inside a world most of us will never see. A German penal psychiatric ward. And look, this isn't some made-up story or a movie, this whole explainer. It's built from the incredibly detailed, first-hand account of one guy who actually lived through it, and somehow managed to document everything he saw on the inside. And our journey really kicks off with this one sentence from his journal. Think about that for a second. It just hits you right away, doesn't it? It tells you everything you need to know about the stakes. We're not talking about a regular hospital. No, this was a place where, from the moment you walked in, survival was the only thing that mattered. So before we even get to the people, and trust me, we'll get to them, we have to talk about the place itself. Station 8, it wasn't just a backdrop. The physical environment, the building, the rooms, it was practically a living, breathing character in the story. It set the whole mood for everything that went down inside those walls. Just look at the common smoking room. I mean, this picture says it all, right? It's a portrait of complete and utter neglect. The walls, a gross yellow-gray color from decades of cigarette smoke. The furniture, get this, it's from the 1880s, just covered in scratches. Even the ceiling has old coffee stains on it. All these little details, they all added up to this constant humming tension. You know, that feeling that at any second something could just snap. Okay, so now that you have a feel for the place, it's time to meet the people who lived there. And we have to start with the author's very first roommate. This is the guy who, as psychologist on staff, literally called the most dangerous patient in the whole facility. In his private journal, the author just called him Psycho-Arab. Just try to imagine the psychological whiplash of that. Your roommate, his whole identity, his entire belief system could flip overnight. And because of that, his view of you would flip too. One day you're okay, the next you're his sworn enemy. The author wrote about how he was constantly being cast as the villain in his roommate's ever-changing extremist fantasies, just bombarded with threats and crazy accusations that made zero sense. But here's the kicker. It wasn't just about this one unstable patient. This next story shows you how truly broken the whole system was. The staff, they weren't just standing by. They were actively helping him with his little scams. They would literally go and take property back from another patient for him just to keep him happy. And the author makes it clear this wasn't a one-time thing. It was a pattern. The staff were in on it. And if you want a perfect snapshot of the raw, unpredictable energy of this place, listen to this. The author saw a patient just let out this primal scream in the common room. Then he winds up and delivers a knockout punch. To himself, right on his own chin. He collapses, right? But then he gets back up, runs to a door, and just punches a hole straight through the wood, shattering his hand in the process. That's the kind of rage that was just boiling under the surface at all times. So that really brings us to the caretakers, right? I mean, if the patients are this volatile, what in the world were the staff doing about it? How are they providing care or keeping things safe? Well, the author's account paints this really disturbing picture of just systemic neglect. And the crazy part is they had this bizarre official philosophy to justify it all. Get this. When the author would ask about why patients were living in absolute filth, the staff's official response was that every patient had a right to squalor. I'm not kidding, a right to squalor. This wasn't just some lazy excuse they made up, it was actual institutional policy. A rule that basically gave them a green light to do absolutely nothing and just let the whole place and the people in it fall apart. I mean, the gap between what they were supposed to do and what they actually did was just staggering. On the one hand, their job was to ensure hygiene. In reality, they let one patient go a year and a half without a single shower. Their job was to hand out food. In reality, they were caught stealing fruit from the patient's trays and even served moldy bread. And their most basic job of all, to keep people safe, one staff member was seen literally kicking a patient's prosthetic leg away from him. It's just unbelievable. So you've got this toxic mix, right? Unpredictable patients and staff who just don't care. And what that creates is an environment where the author realized very quickly that if he was going to survive, it was entirely up to him. No one else was going to help. And that realization led directly to the single most terrifying event in his entire account, a violent, prolonged assault that became a literal fight for his life. The scene starts with our author at his absolute most vulnerable. He's in this deep, drugged sleep from medication they basically pressured him into taking. He's already weak from being homeless before he was admitted. And then he's woken up by this strange sound, something happening right in front of his face. He struggles to open his eyes to figure out what's going on. And what he sees is an assault in progress. Before he can even react, this massive guy, we're talking 160 kilograms, that's over 350 pounds, throws himself on top of him. He's instantly pinned, trapped under his own blanket, totally helpless. For 10 solid minutes, he was just stuck, pinned down, fighting for every breath. He later wrote that it was, quote, the longest 10 minutes of my life. And in that time, his mind was racing, trying to figure out a way, any way, to escape. After those 10 minutes, he sees an opening and he goes for it. He manages to slip out from under the blanket at the foot of the bed. But that just starts the next phase of the fight. Another 10 minutes of just brutal, back and forth struggling. He'd make a break for the door, the attacker would drag him back. He used his judo training to fight back as best he could, until finally, with one last massive surge of adrenaline, he broke through the door and into the hallway. The whole thing, from start to finish, lasted 20 minutes. In his own words, it was as simple and as terrifying as this. This wasn't just a scuffle, it was a fight for his life. And he says two things saved him: his physical fitness and, as he put it, a massive motivation not to be raped. It was that raw, primal will to live that got him through. That assault changed everything. It was the moment he knew, for sure, that he was completely on his own. No help was coming from the staff. No one was going to protect him. So, he had to protect himself. He basically created his own survival guide, a new set of rules to live by in this incredibly hostile world. And his new rules were simple, but they were non-negotiable. First, question everything. That's how we found out the sedatives were actually voluntary, so he stopped taking them immediately. Second, eliminate any perceived weakness. He shaved off his long hair so he wouldn't look as feminine or vulnerable. Third, create hard boundaries. His door was locked, always. No exceptions. And finally, shut down all social contact. Anytime another patient tried to approach him, he shut it down instantly. That was his new code. When you look at the numbers, it really puts his whole experience into perspective. Over the course of his stay, he had more than 21 roommates. That's just a constant churn of instability. He received countless threats. And the amount of actual, meaningful help he got from the staff, according to his own detailed notes, a big, fat 0. So, in the end, this account is so much more than just a list of awful stories. It's really a deep dive into human resilience in the absolute worst of conditions. And it really makes you think. It forces you to ask a really tough question. When the very system that's supposed to protect you and care for you is actually the source of the threat, what does survival even look like? What do you strip down to?